I can't fully describe how I feel when I hear this melody. Maybe you feel the same way. I first learned how to play this opening on piano in 1998 when I was 9 years old. That's because 1998 is the year that Final Fantasy VII, the original Final Fantasy VII, came out on PC. I didn't own a PlayStation, so I had to wait for the PC version. At the time, I didn't know anything about playing piano, so I not only looked up the sheet music for it, I also looked up how to read sheet music just so I could figure it out. To be fair, I only made it as far as the first few bars because once the left hand becomes more complicated, it was way too much for 9-year-old me to try and pull off. Up until that point in my life, I don't think I had ever been so moved and inspired by a piece of music. Of course, it wasn't just the music itself, it was also the emotional significance that that theme carries within the story of Final Fantasy VII. Nostalgia is a deeply personal emotion. We all have our own unique memories that infuse certain experiences with that special feeling of bittersweet longing, coupled with the warm glow of an innocent comfort you may never truly know again. However, living in the era of mass media means that we often all have nostalgic attachments to the same pieces of pop culture. Another thing about my childhood is that at one point I begged my parents to buy me an ocarina. Maybe you can take a wild guess as to why I really wanted to learn how to play this obscure little instrument. I'm not actually going to try and play this on camera because I also learned as a child that it is not a particularly easy instrument to learn how to play. Music has exceptional power in evoking memory. People with Alzheimer's can often vividly recall songs even as other parts of their memories fade, and researchers have found that the music we listen to as teenagers will continue to be incredibly influential on us for the rest of our lives. But you probably didn't need researchers to tell you that. Both the Ocarina of Time and Final Fantasy VII happen to be really good games with really good soundtracks, so it's no surprise that the music from these titles has been widely celebrated. I think it's safe to say that most good games also have good soundtracks. In the same way that most good movies also have good soundtracks, it's just an important part of the experience. I did Google great games with bad music, and this article came up, so obviously there are some exceptions to the rules, but even if the music for a game isn't particularly good, you might still have a strong nostalgic attachment to it simply because you listened to it so many times while playing that game. But music that you truly love is music that you keep coming back to again and again at different times and places in your life. And in doing so, you strengthen your emotional attachment to that music. Seeing the music of Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu performed by a live orchestra was an incredible experience that only heightened my appreciation of that music, and was also an experience I probably would have missed out on if I didn't have the powerful pull of childhood nostalgia to convince me to buy a ticket. Our song is a common feature of many relationships, not just because of the original memory you associate with that song, but because of all the times throughout the relationship where you keep coming back to it. If the first time you heard our song was, say, the night that you and your significant other first met, it can be quite a powerful experience when years later you find yourself dancing together to that song on the night of your wedding. For me and my wife, it's September by Earth, Wind & Fire. It's a pretty good one. In YouTuber Gabby Bell's video, How Nostalgia Controls Us, she points out the staggering amount of money corporations make by exploiting our nostalgia. From endless Disney live-action remakes to insanely overpriced Pokemon cards, nostalgia is a cash cow that can be milked, quite frankly, until the cows come home. But as Gabby points out at the end of her video, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. People have been begging for a remake of Final Fantasy VII for years, so I don't think it's fair to say that Squaresoft is just tapping into our nostalgic attachments for no other reason than to ruthlessly extract money from us. I mean, to be fair, they are stretching it into 3 separate games, but it kind of feels like it deserves to be a trilogy. I mean, the original game did come on 3 separate discs, although you only had to pay once to receive all 3 of them. People like nostalgia, so there will always be a market for nostalgic things. Of course, you can criticize many industries for being too risk-averse and relying too heavily on remakes or adaptations of existing intellectual property, but that's capitalism, baby. New shit doesn't always do well, but there's always a few extra bucks to squeeze out of that old, dried-up, nostalgic cash cow. Anemoia is a term that means nostalgia for a time you've never known. For example, yearning to live in the 1950s. Research suggests that nostalgia doesn't necessarily need to be based on real memories. It can also come from imagined positive past experiences, and this kind of imagination-based nostalgia is likely to be influenced by stories and propaganda about the past. At a certain point, maybe nostalgia isn't even quite the right word. The past always influences the present. That sounded a bit more insightful in my head, but I'm leaving it in. Think about the rampant popularity of mid-century modern design. You could say it's due to a sense of nostalgia for that period in American history, and I'm sure that's true to a certain extent. But many designers agree it's also just an appealing aesthetic that's highly functional and works well in small spaces. I don't think people perform Shakespeare or listen to classical music out of a sense of nostalgia, necessarily. These are simply timeless works that have endured over centuries and spawned countless different adaptations and reimaginings. I mean, it's weird to think that at some point in the future there could be a remake of Final Fantasy VII, but maybe it will ultimately prove to be such a timeless story that future generations continue to return to it time and time again. We live in a time where incredible amounts of cultural material of all kinds are being produced at a dizzying rate, and different trends from different points in time are constantly going in and out of style. If you want to, you can form your whole identity around things or eras you feel nostalgic for. Personally though, I don't think I'm an especially nostalgic person. I don't often yearn to live in some other time period or to return to some previous point in my life. I don't take a lot of photos or hold on to many keepsakes from my past or own thousands and thousands of dollars worth of retro gaming equipment. I never went back and played the original Final Fantasy VII again as an adult. I've been enjoying the remakes, but it's not quite the same. Of course, nothing ever looks quite the same when you see it again through your adult eyes. We all know the feeling of going back to a park you used to play at as a kid, remembering it as this incredibly expansive place full of endless possibilities, only to be surprised by how small and relatively unimpressive it looks now. Our bodies have gotten bigger, but perhaps our imaginations have also gotten smaller. That's a stupid line. Nostalgia is a broad concept that comes in many different shades, and perhaps it is more prevalent today because there are simply so many little reminders all around us of times gone by. Perhaps many of us live in a state of perpetual adolescence, still clinging to the things that brought us joy as children, but unable to ever feel that carefree sense of magic in quite the same way. Or maybe it really is better to never grow up. While there certainly are situations where dwelling too much on nostalgia can become unhealthy, for the most part, psychologists view it as a positive emotion with the potential to improve our overall well-being. It is, without a doubt, an essential part of the human condition. It's not something you can fully control, it's something that comes over you. It's like a song that always gets stuck in your head.